So, in the spirit of Zen mind, beginner mind, I am not a Zen practitioner, but I am a poet who has been thinking a lot about the ways that I can, pause and let the text be the experience, and also how to let myself be in the experience. So part of that falls to what you said earlier about the ability to stumble and make mistakes and be spontaneous and joyful. And I want to recognize that I've been doing a lot of that on the land where I live, on the unceded ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish, and Stolo people. I specifically live really on the land of the Musqueam people. And being on that space has been extremely interesting to me as I consider the fact that not only can words do violence, but words can also heal. And the Musqueam people have lived through the apocalypse. For many of us, we're just experiencing our first notion of the Anthropocene. But I just want to recognize that there are cultures and peoples who have withstood the apocalypse and who are living and who are present. And I think I'm really aware of that when I walk through nature near my home and think about the ways that the river wants to heal itself, and the land wants to heal itself, and the body and the brain want to heal themselves. So in that spirit, in the late afternoon, I offer the opportunity for all of you to just please take care of yourselves. While I'm reading some poems, please feel free to stand up and breathe and move and stretch. And if you want to lie down on the floor, that's fine with me. As you take care of yourself, you're taking care of the others in this room too. And so I experience that as being really generous. And it totally puts me at ease, which is sort of a topic of what I'm going to talk about with this. So Trauma Head is my second book of poems, or more correctly, it's a long poem memoir of a year in my life, where I begin the poem finding out that I am having a brain injury. And so what happened is I had a stroke, and then they retro-diagnosed the stroke as coming from a vertebral artery dissection, which means that the lining of the artery tore away from the artery itself and produced in me the conditions for this small stroke, which made me temporarily paralyzed on the left side of my body, and it passed really quickly. But what didn't pass is when the neurologist said, we figured out what we think it is, just there's nothing we can do about it. We can't fix it for you, we can't do microsurgery, just go home, try not to put your head below your heart. So for a year, they said, if you're okay in a year, we'll know that you're okay, which is such an ontology. And I didn't really know what that means. So I had gone from being extremely gregarious and fit and 41 years old and non-medicated and just working out all the time to suddenly immobilized by not only the circumstances of what I was experiencing, which were a migraine every day, my eyes dilating at different times, but a profound sense of, oh my God, the big one's coming. So like if I got a little twitch, I thought, what is that? So I was hypervigilant. And if anybody, you're Zen practitioners, so I assume you understand the notion of attention and vigilance in a different way than I might, but it really wrecked me. I was so hypervigilant, I began to experience panic attacks. And some of this could have been produced by the fact that the stroke was in my brainstem, which not only controls the breathing, but also the flight or fight response. So I was experiencing this time of not being able to be who I was. I lost my sense of humor. I lost my desire to move. I was afraid if I got my heart beat up that my brain would pop. I didn't even know what would happen. If I dropped something, I had to just leave it on the floor or get my kids to get it. And I was really profoundly in a place of excruciating not knowingness. Like, I didn't know if I was going to be better. I didn't know if I was going to become much worse precipitously, maybe one morning not wake up. I had no idea. And I had a lot of support. So I'm not going to go into value judgments of whether or not I handled it well, whatever well might be, but suffice to say that I was lucky enough to have writing and poetry and craft in my toolbox. And while I couldn't write while I was healing, I knew that I was profoundly not myself, and that, like Joan Didion's Year of Magical Thinking, there's no way I was going to believe who I had been during this time. So I tried to grab a line and jot it down when I could. And it's funny, the neurologist had said, well, in a year, if you're fine, we're just going to let you go and you can stop taking baby aspirin and you'll be fine, which is ludicrous. But the year to the day, I found that I had come to the end of my little journal. And some of the pages just have like a line on them. I couldn't write much. I couldn't hold two conversations at once. I couldn't hear my husband's podcast and be comfortable. I could touch something, but I couldn't also look at something. My world became extremely hyper-focused. And that was just because my brain was healing, but also because my body had slowed. My focus had changed. So that record that I kept in the journal became the skeleton of Trauma Head. And I went back later when I was well enough and I added the flesh and the metaphor and the, that sort of stuff, and came up with this long poem in experimental poetry. So the notion of being well or unwell was really interesting to me, and I read a lot of Kierkegaard, who I call the patron saint of being bummed out. But, his book, Either Or, I loved that title. That's how I was feeling. I was feeling either or. And so I started using the stroke key or the slash to indicate for me those moments of being fractured in the book, or my attention or my sense of self being separated from itself, something like that. So I start the book with the epigraph from Dear Soren. I feel like a letter printed backward in the line. And that launches the poem from which I will read some pages. One of the things I'm doing with the book as a gift to myself in terms of self-care is reading it sequentially through. So the very first day that I opened the book, I read from page 1 to 15. The second reading I did in a second city, I picked up on page 16 and read on. And what that's doing is allowing me to not become fixated in the site of trauma that would be most easily excerptable. So I am experiencing the entire narrative of healing and also coming to know my book, which for those of you who've ever published a book, you know that you write it in a Word doc down. If you're like me, that's how I did it. Maybe you have your own methodologies, but the minute the book goes into InDesign and becomes, with its formats and its margins and then gets its cover, that's a brand new being. And I really believe in Borges's idea that you cannot read the same book twice. And so I'm happy to say, in a very strange moment of felicity, here I am at the Zen Cascadia conference and about to embark on my 7th reading of this from the very first page. So thank you for all coming along with me on this. And after I read a little bit from this, I'm going to talk about Against Death. Actually, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to read a couple paragraphs from my introduction. And this book is a sibling book to Trauma Head. This is one that I edited with essays from different people from different places in their lives who have come close to death, because I needed to find community, and I needed to find a group of people who understood how I look fine on the outside. I was not fine. I was not fine at all. And anybody who has experienced any of those invisibilities, like depression or OCD or anxiety, or having a violent conversation over breakfast, you look the same, but you're not walking around as the same person. So I just gesture to all of you that I hope to listen and see you in your fullest. And Jason, thank you for that line, to study the self is to forget oneself. Where are you? Where'd you go? There you are. That was really irritating and comforting at the same time. I don't understand it, so I think that's a great thing. So, okay. I'll just start. And like I say, because I'm just going to read several pages at once, please don't feel shy about moving around or anything. So, here we go. I guess I should say that this, you'll pick it up, but because this is the beginning, I'm literally at the park working out when this happens. Voice is flashlight, where laughter is laser, clear-cutting sleepiness. Unbreakfasted, we are here to work outside. Repeat a schedule of health. Field exhales yesterday's heat. Fog foam above the grass. We runners scissor-cut swaths through this milk. None of us can be sure where we stand. We see our bodies as flash, reflective vest, slurry of motion. In the witching, we unspool mats, swing weights, count, bend, crack wise about how tough we are. Dew fastens on keys dumped from pockets, chilled skin, bright euphoria, shoes veiled in diamond drops. The body wakes. A market exchange of conversion, blue to red, diaphanous finger spread, all the vessels open to cells, the matrices, the unities, dawn written inside my eyelids, fogged breath, breathing fog, coyote swirl and still of owl. All the vesicles surge, surf miles of internal roads. Oh, adrenaline, my intimate. Oh, endorphin, my biologic morphine. Ventricles push and tumble, squeeze and receive, squeeze and receive, squeeze and receive. Sugar-coaty synapses, super slick collisions. Soundlessly oblivious to the oracle, I do not think to brace myself for tragedy in minuscule. Butterfly effect across the network. T minus seconds and sit up. If the left eyelid twitch, sit up. If the left cheek contract, up. If the forehead prickle, if the scalp, perfect delineation. Left, right hemisphere, freeze. So cut the tongue in half. An ice travel down the arm, hand fist fall to mat. That tongue, now the kettlebell. Instant. Lost, the clapper. Missed. Now am soundless. How to call for help. Need. Numb rush left turn to the center line. The skull. I feel sigh where the brains don't meet. Canyon gap. Now I'm in the crevasse. Snap fingers, slap, pound mat with some crumpled hand. Kill their laughter with a monster's voice, dull slab tongue. Listen, one molasses legs unzip, amphitheater formation. 9 statues, 1 prone. Switch, pulled. How tripped the wire? Why fiber? Electrical disconnectal down left side, erasure of intention, silence along the left side. Still. Meet. Blank, where body has been. Question mind, brain. I'm afraid. Know where this is going. 7.5 minute. Ambulance. We'll never find in this dark. Face up to stars. Am newborn to danger. palm-sized anchor on my thigh. Ivering sets in. Soon, imperceptible slim slip, inside slickening, something refreshes, shunts, shakes free, nerves fizz, ignite, begin, speak, move through a head spun by systolic percussion and allegory. Etiology. Label all specimens with patient's first and last names, date of birth and/or patient health number and site. Body, 3. Tongue, fewer than 0. Fog, 3. Squeeze, 4. Cut, 2. Breath, 0. She, who I see as me, tiptoes back from the woods. Black hound bristles, charges the 12-point stag, those ragged antlers, snagged oak. Shocky, someone whispers. Left side of fire, debris falling, architecture mid-bombing. Who is the body? And how quickly tongue turns foreign. The body, barbarian cask. Some she sips mortal confusion. Eyes full-mooned. Every instinct geared to escape, away from the body. The idea. What has come to demediate me? Animal panic and transformation is now. I fable, I fate. Sky carries cloud. Curled brain has dropped its load of firewood on the mirror pond. The forest I have to enter, a thicket, a midnight fear. Forced to duty, pushed to tunnel, coming, flags the ambulance. One step in and cannot see, surviving within tangles of gorse. Owls and wolves wait for me to break. Ferns, fallen limbs, catch my cloth, worn against rushing. Jeez, it's almost moments pin. Lambs will longer, Clothos labors. Slim digits tie knots to deceive. Sister Atropos, the scissor sister. Spun, I nubble mushrooms, dwarf apples, bitter greens, touch spider sacks and push fingertips into nurse logs. Are you? Crows pull time in ink trails through silvered sky. Bullet bodies sow themselves into precipitation, contract time, whip stitch fear through heavens. Furl, uncurl, can I? A pair of signs, a field grass bed, a stone pillow. Night walks away, wordless, relinquishing the remainder to a weak dawn service. And I am suddenly thinking about the barber. Jars of bright blue cone juice, crisp part drawn by black teeth, dividing left, right, everything wrong. Mirror. The carving line is profound, needle-tight hemisphere. Won't say it, though I've scanned the files. Stroke presents fear aphasia. What will I without words? Yet am think placing illables correct. Am I not? Catalog simulacra. Fast forward. Rehab, adaptive wheels, cyclical caregiving, drone. No, alt-delete. No future of watchfulness. Not this. again. Will not adapt if chip, carve, chisel, dissever, incise, take the blade by the knife. Paramedic flash, light, iris sliver, down beam, please deliver God talk. What's your name? L-E, how are you doing? Word shell, jagged, familiar impulse on tongue reveals blown off face. When did it start? What were you doing? Drop, thread, atropos nearly rises. M, moving and touching, or words, flex, wiggle. Not this ischemic event. Give them something else to read. Syllab braid, twinning, circuit, hoop, and ligature. Uniforms exhort me to slow down breath, pin to mat, I run away. Panting is happening to me like childhood redheadedness, left-handedness. I leave, can't in, X, past stroke of 2, am cartoon cat who left body behind, floating to a 9th life fully formed. Cat is 2 cats. Cat is chalk outline. Know where I am going or for how long. I turn back to the mat, which is empty. Medicine begins with losing a name. The bed is long and thin and hard and cold. Pack animal, go where expected, crave curves, to burrow or nest, but recognize cold and flat and thick and numb am meant to be displayed. Illness is platform. Numb and cold and still and stiff, and this bed is built of violence. Stiff and cold and thin and mute, brisk hands start a line, depart, return, withdraw, arrive, bring a blanket thin as human skin. Give body over to whomever wants to touch it. The book is it's a very happy thing for me. Living it was horrible, but the act of creation and of agency and the playfulness that I had with it was and continues to be really exciting and fun for me. And as Trauma Head was becoming, because it was evolving and going to the publisher, and we all know how glacial that is, speaking of water, I knew that I had not been finding the succor or the comfort where I expected it. I knew that some of the kindest people in my life who had no experience with something like this or being near death, as much as they wanted to, they didn't understand. And it was some of the roughest, gruffest people who I thought were going to be, incapable of that sharing with me. They got it. And I began to understand that there's almost like a watermark on those of us who have experienced coming into this situation of precarity. And of course, largely this was a lesson for myself because I had always been at high capacity and I had a lot of support. So my own notion of precarity and what other people are dealing with was very sheltered from that reality. So I wanted to be with people as much as I could and sent out the call for people to send me their first-person essays about their experiences coming close to and with death, whatever that meant for them. And the book, this just came out in September, and I know this is recorded, but it's a secret. This is going into its second printing right now, which I'm really excited about. And it's thanks to the amazing contributors. We've been able to have launches in Iceland, New York, across Canada, Oaxaca, Mexico. So that's been really gratifying because, as we all know, we don't talk about death very much in this world. And I don't know why that is, because the only example of perfect gender equity we have, as one of the contributors said in here, is death. Like, not even birth is an example of gender equity because of selective abortion. So if it's okay, if people are all right to listen for a few more paragraphs, I'd like to just read a little bit of that and then sit down and exchange. Okay. Let's just take a moment to switch from poetry to nonfiction. It's a totally different thing, right? Okay, origins. I grew up with a mother, uncle, and grandfather, all surgeons, for whom the durability of the body and its marvels are a practical matter. In a home filled with medical journals, where lab samples were frequently stored in the fridge, mortality was familiar. Death was neither negative, cruel robber, nor positive, sweet release. It was knit into daily life as fact. Our busy, loving, sporty house was full of movement and spontaneity. Lively. And still, the bloom of death took precedence over everything. Any conversation or family moment could be interrupted by a beep from my mother's pager calling her to an emergency. We lived 5 minutes from the hospital for precisely this reason. I knew the nurse's station as well as I knew my friends' homes. I knew on turning the corner into a patient's room how to push forward through the reflexive pause of apprehension. By age 5, I could count tubes and discern a catheter from an IV. I held hands with patients while sutures were removed and pulled curtains around beds. I complimented well-healing amputations from a perch on the bed where a leg had once been. I played with needleless syringes in the tub and did homework with purple surgical markers printed with a ruler on the side for measuring incisions. Reminders of the body's fragility and its persistence were omnipresent. My bedtime stories about the day's medical mysteries were just as dramatic, just as somatic, as my father's Greek mythology tales. He told me about Medusa's gaze turning people to stone, while my mother explained the same predicament in the form of ALS, a degenerative neurological condition, rather than a moral one. I interrupted both their stories to focus on the point of inflection, where things went right or wrong, asking for the story beside the story. What did the characters do? How did they go on? What happened next? This is all to say that death has never been a strange character. I thought I knew it. My father's death when I was 15 pushed me through the first grapplings of grief and demystified another aspect of what one can choose and not choose. Soon my own experiences with coming close to death added another layer of meaning. Yet it was not the parachuting accident with a failed chute when I was 20 that altered me, even though I did experience the hackneyed life flashing before me as I fell. It was not the near drowning with my family swimming too far under a coral reef against tide and current either. Nor was it the murder of a man in the movie theater 3 rows ahead of me who was shot in the head at close range. I still check exits and auditoriums, but I can't say his murder changed me. Neither was it the smoke-filled airplane cabin with my husband and young children on an emergency landing, although I suspect I'll never shake the tang of sadness in the look he and I exchanged over their heads as we assumed crash position. Each of us is an idiosyncratic bundle of experiences, and what registers as monumental for one may be negligible for another. What matters is where we put meaning. One person's crisis is another's party anecdote. My training in literature urges me to consider Borges' idea of never being able to read the same text twice. Each time we approach the text, we're a new self, a unique bundle of thoughts at a precise cultural moment. Each reading becomes absolutely its own iteration. Certainly, if I were to parachute out of a plane this afternoon and had to cut away my chute, I would have a different reaction than I did at 20. At 49, I have more to lose, or at least a better sense of what I don't want to lose. To be against something can be to reject or refute it. But to be against death can also mean to be in contact with, pressed up next to be intimately proximate with mortality. This anthology gathers a community of people who self-identify as having come close. Some pieces may touch on similar details. In fact, it was only late in the editing that I noticed a magical twinning that runs through the collection. Here again, I feel Borges tap me on the shoulder. There are echoes, point of view contrasts, alterations on strangely intimate stories that one could not plan or solicit on purpose. 2 pieces written by people who are actively dying. 2 by elder women ready for what is coming. 2 by young widowers about fatherhood. 2 by people negotiating suicidal thoughts. 2 hospice volunteers. 2 mothers relating their sons' dangerous addictions. While I recognize the magic involved in a text finding its companion, each piece is particular and peculiar in all the best ways. So often the meaning of an anthology becomes clear only as the pieces form a whole. This assembly of responses confirms that there's no one way to be. No matter how common an ailment or predicament, we each navigate our irreproducible way using the tools we've picked up through the years. We come up against death, and it is brand new. And yet, nothing is new. We have been dying for eons. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was your diagnosis again?
I had a vertebral artery dissection with an ischemic event in my brainstem.
I want to talk about situations of precarity.
Yeah.
And the relationship between those and the reflexive pulse of anxiety.
Yeah.
Is that the phrase? I don't know if I got the second phrase exactly right.
It sounds right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those are 2 phrases that you used, and that desire not to go through the door. Well, I haven't read the book yet, but I want to know more about your experience with that and your thoughts about that.
Sure. So thank you for that. And I recognize that there are experts in every single seat here. So all I can do is share my little stab at this. But in particular, that pause at the door, I think, is a fear response. I remember when I was little, it was just really gross to go see hurt people. Like, that was like a biological response I had. I just would have to okay, and I would have to overcome it logically. Writing this was a reaction of impulse. And so I was very much in touch with that. I want to run away. I wanted to run away from myself. And of course, I couldn't do that. But what I could do is ideologically examine what it was that was going on in here. So you heard me read, I count body 4, breath 0. Those are ideological footnotes at the bottom of the page. So I took chunks of the manuscript and I ran it through a word count, and then found how many times I used certain words, because I was interested in the idea of diagnosing the text. How am I doing? How's it going? Who is who's offering the diagnosis here? Is it the reader? Is it me? Is it the machine? What do you make of these numbers? What do I make of these numbers? So just to decenter the knowingness. Does that answer your question?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Do you know the modality craniosacral therapy?
I don't know the first word, but I know craniosacral therapy. Yeah.
Craniosacral therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you use that to be treated, or and how it all worked out.
Yeah, thank you. So I was ready to try anything and was also terrified of having anybody touch me, my neck. So I should specify, I didn't want to have, like if a massage therapist, that I would like stiffen and start to panic because I didn't know if this was going to happen again. But I went to an energy healer, and she, like I write about it in here, she was like pulling what she said were like long black licorice ropes of bad energy out of me. And she was the one who said, just go outdoors. So talking about the Muspium land and the analog cure, I was definitely, like what Nadine said, putting my hand in the ground and trying to find, because I couldn't listen to like radio noise or anything electronic. I couldn't watch TV or anything. So I was very open to any kind of holistic treatment. Language was super difficult for me, and I was also panicked. So naturally, as a person who is like a touchy person, I found a lot of calming energy and healing energy in physical touch. So I would frequently like slide into my children's bed and just let their little lungs and bellows regulate me. Or I would, if I was feeling, not like I was just about to burst into tears and then start laughing because I had labile emotions, but I would just touch my husband and be like, don't talk, don't even move your hand, but I just need to have human energy just grounding me. So craniosacral I didn't specifically try just because I was like, I knew it was super gentle, but I wasn't in a place of being able to accept that touch at that time. Yeah.
I was really intrigued by the spacing of the words and the lines, and also the patterns of the breath as you were speaking. And could you speak to that? How
sure.
that came to you?
So every time I'm doing that gasp, that's a stroke.
Yeah.
And I had to think about how am I going to communicate to the reader, to the listener, what the reader knows, which is that there's a stroke key here, there's a slash.
Yeah.
So I was like, what could I do? I raise my arm, I could like do something. And then I realized my whole point in writing this book was to try to invoke the feelings I was having. So how am I going to make you feel what I was feeling? And so by doing that gasping, I'm not only making myself super nervous by interrupting my own breath, but I think that it, in the listener, it's kind of like, whoa, is she okay? Like, is that on purpose? And that weirdness is kind of, I think, what I was feeling while I was healing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I think that was just enough weirdness. I think it was really well expressed. I'm an occupational therapist, and my favorite group of people to work with are people that have just sustained brain injuries, particularly strokes.
Oh, really?
So I have this whole storehouse of gratitude and grief from those experiences of working with those people, and I feel like listening to you, I harnessed a lot of those emotions and memories in an inexplicable way. So it feels like I've kind of just been able to have some kind of release just by listening to your
Oh, my goodness.
So it was really beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. That really means a lot to me. Thank you. Everybody want to take a big breath? Yeah, exactly.
Or you can take a big breath. So, Elee, when you were receiving the contributions for the anthology you edited, did you find kinship with certain expressions of that proximity to dying?
Immediately.
Yeah, emotional kinship.
Yes.
Yeah.
Immediately. And everybody's different. And like, I mean, you all know writers are freaks. Like some of the people were like delivering bright and clean prose that didn't need a change, and other people were like throwing me things that we had to go through 11 times. And everybody was bringing their own dynamics to it. And I very quickly had to recognize, okay, like I'm in this weird dichotomy of power as the editor, even though I don't feel that. Just writers, whoa, the editor, there's an imbalance there. So I need to make sure that we are as equilibrated as possible. So what I recognize is asking somebody, hey, Daphne, tell me about the time you almost died. Like, that's not cool. You can't do that. So I really thought about, okay, well, if I'm going to be so presumptive as to do that, I need to examine my situation here. Like, what am I asking them to open to, and how can I meet them there? So what are the ways that I'm going to transmit that this is going to be safe for us both, respectful, that I recognize that we share something, but I know nothing according to what they've, and some of these people had never told anyone about their experiences, and suddenly they were writing them and they were publishing them. Like, this is a huge act of, that's a leap. So, the good thing about being a writer is you can really focus it to being about the craft, and you can separate the speaker of the piece from the author. And I made sure to do everything energetically and emotionally to support that, so that they felt they didn't have to re-traumatize themselves as I was editing them and that we were having conversations. And just really tried to slow it down. Like I was telling Elizabeth that I made these little rules for self-care as I was editing. You all know that acronym HALT. So I wouldn't edit if I was hungry, angry, late, or tired. Because I was getting too fussy and I was getting too spicy, sending back comments. That's no good. That's not how I want to be in the world. I'm good, late, and tired. So FYI, don't ask your kids complicated questions if they are hungry, angry, late, or tired. That's like my little Zen Buddha baby was teaching me that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, it does and it doesn't. It tells me your editing process, which was very respectful.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if you had any difficulty relating to the pieces you got as an editor, rather than as simply a reader.
Zero. It was immediate, everything between us got out of the way, and I was just with you. Daphne doesn't have a piece in here. I was speaking allegorically, but I felt no distance.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that attention and that sharing. I always think it's funny, we say pay attention, that's so capitalist. I just want to say thank you for spreading attention. I really appreciate it.